Most people spend their lives desperately trying to predict what's coming next, clinging to routines and plans as if they're life rafts in a wild ocean. But here's a truth that often goes unspoken. The more you fight to make life certain, the more you end up feeling anxious and exhausted. Even the Buddha taught that everything is always changing. Nothing is guaranteed, not even the next breath. And yet, we chase after security, only to find ourselves caught in endless cycles of worry and disappointment. What if the peace you're searching for isn't hidden in controlling every outcome, but in learning how to embrace the unknown? What if the secret to a truly strong mind is not found in avoiding uncertainty, but in welcoming it as a wise teacher? In today's video, I want to share with you the Buddhist-inspired rules that help transform fear of the unknown into inner strength and freedom. These aren't just ancient teachings, they're powerful tools for living with more clarity, resilience, and peace, no matter what life throws your way. There's something in this message for everyone, and I promise that if you stay with me until the end, you'll come away with a whole new perspective on what it means to live with courage and presence. If you appreciate what we're doing here, a simple free favor I ask is to hit that subscribe button and join our community. And please don't skip any part of the video. Every moment contains an insight that could make a real difference in your life. Let's dive in and discover how embracing uncertainty with wisdom from the Buddha can make life not just easier, but truly extraordinary. We spend so much of our lives convinced that if we just work harder to figure everything out, we'll finally get to relax. We check the news, make backup plans for our backup plans, and stay awake at night running through all the what-ifs. It's almost as if we believe that anxiety is a necessary price to pay for a sense of safety. But the more we try to tie everything down, the more the ground seems to shift beneath us. Life is unpredictable by its very nature, and every day reminds us that no matter how much we prepare, there will always be things we simply can't control. Other people's choices, unexpected losses, sudden changes, even the weather. It's not a flaw in the system, it's the system itself. Buddhism doesn't sugarcoat this truth. The Buddha, after his long search for answers, realized that the very nature of existence is impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing is fixed forever. What most of us never realize is that our pain doesn't come from change itself, but from our refusal to accept it. We try to force outcomes, resist new realities, and deny that things might not go as planned. This resistance, this clinging to certainty, is like grabbing onto a thorny vine as it's being pulled away. Every moment we refuse to let go, we're hurt even more. Buddha taught that suffering begins when we try to make the impermanent permanent. He saw how deeply people struggle to accept that relationships evolve, bodies age, jobs come and go, and sometimes the things we wanted most never show up. But he also saw something else. Freedom is possible not by controlling the chaos, but by making peace with it. Think about it. How much time do we spend in silent battle with reality? The plans that fell apart, the friends who drifted away, the future we imagined that never quite materialized. We mourn these losses twice, once because they happened and again because we can't let them go. Our minds replay scenarios, searching for a way to undo what's already been done, or to predict what hasn't even happened yet. This is exhausting, and the more we fight, the more we suffer. It's as if we're standing in the middle of a river, trying to stop the water from flowing, when the only real peace is found by stepping back and letting the river move as it will. Buddhism doesn't tell you to become numb or indifferent. It teaches you to develop a different kind of strength, a strength that comes from being at ease with not knowing. In Buddhist philosophy, there's a saying, "Uncertainty is the only certainty there is." When you start to accept this, something amazing happens. You stop wasting your energy on battles you can't win, and that energy becomes available for the things you can influence, your attitude, your responses, your choices. Acceptance isn't a defeat, it's the starting point for real freedom. It means you stop trying to swim against the current, and instead, you learn to float, to trust that you'll find your way, even if you don't know what's around the next bend. This doesn't mean you shouldn't care about your life or make plans for the future, but it does mean holding those plans lightly, knowing they might change, and being okay with that. The Buddha described this as the middle path, not swinging between blind optimism and despair, but learning to walk steadily, moment by moment, through whatever arises. When you accept that uncertainty is part of life, you stop seeing it as a threat. Instead, it becomes an invitation to let go of unnecessary tension, to breathe deeper, to stay curious, and to remember that every challenge also brings new possibilities. There's something quietly life-changing about realizing you don't have to fight with your own mind every day. For so many of us, the pattern is the same. A wave of anxiety or doubt sweeps in, and we try to chase it away. Maybe you overthink, argue with yourself, or desperately search for a distraction, anything to make the uncomfortable feeling disappear. The modern world only makes this harder. Every notification, every opinion, every new piece of news feels like it demands your attention or reaction. But what if you didn't have to solve or fix every thought and emotion that shows up? What if the greatest relief is found in simply observing what's happening inside you without being swept away by it? Buddha's teachings offer a radical but gentle invitation. Be the observer of your mind, not the prisoner of it. He didn't say, don't feel fear or never be sad. He taught that suffering grows when we cling to or fight against our experience. Instead, mindfulness is about cultivating an awareness so clear and steady that you can watch each thought, each feeling, pass through you like clouds drifting across an open sky. The clouds might be thick, dark, or heavy at times, but the sky remains vast and unchanged. This simple perspective is the heart of Buddhist wisdom, learning to create space between what you feel and what you do about it. Most people never learn how to pause and witness their mind. From a young age, we're conditioned to react, to judge, and to solve problems as quickly as possible. But the mind is not a problem to fix. Thoughts are not emergencies. Emotions are not instructions. Buddha once compared our minds to a wild elephant, running in all directions. Without gentle awareness, it tramples everything in its path, including our peace. But through the practice of mindful witnessing, you begin to tame that wildness. You start to see thoughts for what they are. Just thoughts, not reality, not commands, just temporary visitors passing through the home of your awareness. Here's where things get interesting. When you stop wrestling with every thought and feeling, you don't become numb or disconnected. In fact, you become more alive, more awake. You notice how quickly anger flares and fades, how sadness swells and then softens, how worry shows up uninvited but always leaves eventually. You start to realize you are not the passing weather, you are the sky itself. You don't have to become your fear or your doubt or your frustration. You can greet them with gentle curiosity, watch them come and go, and remain rooted in something much deeper and calmer. The world around you will still be noisy. There will always be people, situations, and news stories that push your buttons. But when you become skilled at witnessing without absorbing, you protect your peace from the chaos of the outside world. You can listen to someone venting without taking on their anger. You can hear criticism without letting it define your worth. You can experience disappointment without letting it cloud your whole view of life. This is what it means to be the sky, not the storm. There's this quiet pressure in our world to care about everything all the time. It's like we're constantly being told that a good person is someone who's up to date on every issue, who reacts to every message, who stretches themselves thin to keep up with every expectation and every plea for attention. But there's a secret that almost no one talks about. Caring about everything doesn't make your heart bigger. It just makes your spirit heavier. At first, it might seem noble to pour your energy into every cause, every conflict, and every person's crisis. Maybe you grew up thinking that being a good friend, partner, or family member meant saying yes to every request and never letting anyone down. But somewhere along the way, the lines get blurry. The more you give yourself away, the less you have left for what truly matters. It's one of those lessons that seems to go against everything we're taught. If you only care about a few things, doesn't that make you cold or selfish? But Buddha's teachings on compassion offer a much deeper wisdom. The Buddha spoke often about the power of wise attention and skillful means. In Buddhist thought, compassion isn't about exhausting yourself on every problem. It's about seeing clearly where your energy, your care, and your presence can actually make a difference. When you try to be everything for everyone, your attention becomes scattered, like water spilled on a stone. It goes everywhere, but never sinks in deep enough to nourish anything. It's not just your time that gets depleted. Your peace, your clarity, and even your physical health begin to suffer when you carry burdens that were never meant to be yours. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you felt drained after saying yes to something your heart wasn't truly in? How many times have you found yourself lying awake at night, turning over someone else's worries, or feeling guilty because you couldn't do more for someone or something? There's a Buddhist parable about a person crossing a river with a raft. When they reach the other side, they don't keep carrying the raft on their back. They leave it behind, grateful for its help, but aware that it's no longer needed. In the same way, learning to let go of unnecessary obligations and to care with intention is not an act of coldness. It's an act of wisdom. It's understanding that your energy is limited and that the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the world is to use it where it can truly make a difference. That's the heart of intentional caring. It's not about closing your eyes to suffering or refusing to help those in need. Instead, it's about becoming conscious of your own limits and asking yourself, is this truly mine to carry? Will this help me grow in compassion, or will it lead me to resentment and burnout? The Buddha taught that true compassion comes from clarity, not compulsion. He once advised his followers to develop loving kindness not just for others but for themselves. If your heart is depleted, your light dims. When you learn to focus your care, your love and kindness become powerful instead of scattered. You can be present for the moments that matter most and the people who genuinely need you without being weighed down by the noise of the world. You might notice that when you begin to set boundaries and choose where your care goes, there's a sense of guilt or even fear that rises up. What will people think? Will they call you selfish? But as your practice deepens, something shifts. You realize that people who truly love and respect you don't want you to suffer on their behalf. They want you to thrive. And you can show up with more joy, more patience, and more real compassion when you're not drained by everything else. This is where Buddhism's wisdom about the middle path comes in. Not going to extremes, not getting lost in constant busyness, but walking with balance and discernment. There's a subtle heaviness that creeps in when we measure our lives by how tightly we're able to hold on, whether to routines, relationships, dreams, or even old versions of ourselves. It's almost like we're carrying around invisible bags filled with stories of who we think we should be and how life is supposed to go. And the strangest part is, the longer we carry these bags, the more convinced we become that we need them for survival. But Buddhism turns this idea on its head. The Buddha taught that clinging is at the root of suffering, not because wanting things or caring about outcomes is wrong, but because attachment blinds us to the truth that everything in life is always shifting. So much of the exhaustion we feel deep down comes from gripping too tightly to things that are already trying to leave, transform, or grow. Maybe it's that familiar ache when a friendship changes or ends, and instead of letting it evolve, you find yourself replaying old memories, wishing things could go back to how they were. Or maybe it's the discomfort of watching your own identity shift, realizing you're not the same person you were a few years ago, but still trying to squeeze yourself into the same boxes, same expectations, same routines. We do this with jobs, with ambitions, with even the little rituals that once brought comfort but now feel like chores. It's human nature to want stability, yet, in the teachings of the Buddha, we find that true stability doesn't come from forcing things to remain the same. It comes from learning how to let go not just once, but again and again. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring, give up on your dreams, or become cold. Quite the opposite. Buddhist wisdom invites us to love fully, to be present and passionate, but without turning people or goals into anchors that drag us down when they inevitably shift. There's an old Buddhist analogy. Imagine you're holding a rope, and on the other end is something you desperately want to keep, a person, a job, a version of yourself. The river of life tugs at the rope, pulling it away. The harder you grip, the more friction and pain you feel in your hands. But the moment you release, the pain subsides. It doesn't mean you lose what's on the other end. It means you're no longer hurting yourself trying to fight the flow. This idea shows up everywhere in Buddhist teachings. Non-attachment, or upadana, isn't about indifference, it's about freedom. When you're attached, your peace depends on conditions staying exactly how you want them. And as soon as life changes, as it always does, you're thrown into anxiety, disappointment, and fear. But when you practice letting go, you realize that you can be at peace regardless of circumstances. You can appreciate what you have without trying to trap it. You can experience joy in the present without constantly fearing loss in the future. It's not a call to become a wandering monk or to give up everything you love, but a gentle reminder: the tighter you cling, the more you suffer. The more you release, the lighter you become. There's something quietly miraculous that happens when you put this into practice. Think about the times in your life when you finally let go of an expectation, or forgave yourself for a mistake, or simply stopped holding a grudge. Wasn't there a sense of relief, even if it was bittersweet? The Buddha described this as unbinding, the moment when you set down a burden you didn't realize you were carrying. Suddenly life feels a bit more spacious, a bit more open, and you begin to see new possibilities where before there was only struggle. It's as if, by loosening your grip on how things should be, you create room for something even better to arrive, something that aligns more naturally with who you are now. In daily life, letting go might look like releasing the urge to control every conversation, or gently stepping back from relationships that no longer nurture you, or allowing yourself to try something new without the fear of failing. It could mean simplifying your environment, clearing out old possessions that carry emotional weight, or letting yourself grieve and move forward after a disappointment. Every act of letting go is a small act of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the unfolding of life, trust in the wisdom that the Buddha shared so many centuries ago. It's about believing that you don't need to force or chase or grip so tightly. You can flow with life, and in doing so, you'll find a strength and freedom that was impossible to reach while you were busy holding on. Some moments in life seem to hit us out of nowhere, a harsh word from someone we care about, an unexpected setback at work, a sudden burst of anxiety that catches us off guard. In those moments, it's almost as if we're not choosing our actions, but just reacting almost automatically, like a spark to dry grass. And afterward, when the dust settles, we're left wondering, why did I say that? Why did I let it get to me? This is something everyone experiences, and it's exactly where the teachings of the Buddha become so practical, so immediately useful in the middle of everyday chaos. You see, Buddhism isn't about escaping from the world or pretending emotions don't exist. Instead, it's about creating a tiny bit of space, sometimes just a single breath, between what happens to us and what we do next. That small pause is more powerful than most people realize. It's the difference between letting life knock us around like a leaf in the wind and learning to move through challenges with grace and wisdom. The Buddha taught that with our thoughts we make the world, but he also pointed out that every action is born from intention, not just impulse. When we train ourselves to notice the gap between stimulus and response, we unlock the ability to shape our reality in a much more peaceful and intentional way. Think about the last time you felt triggered. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic, or a friend's comment stung a little too much. It's so natural to want to snap back, defend ourselves, or dwell in irritation. But here's the truth. In those first few seconds after something happens, we have a rare window of freedom. Most people miss it. They get swept up by their emotions and let old habits take over. But Buddhist practice is all about awareness, about seeing that window, stepping into it, and choosing what comes next. It doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or pretend you're not hurt. It means you give yourself permission to pause, to really see what's happening inside, and to respond from a place of clarity instead of just reacting on autopilot. In Buddhism, this approach is called mindfulness, the practice of being fully present, not just with what's happening outside, but also with the subtle shifts inside our own minds. When we become mindful, we start to notice the physical sensations of anger rising, the tightness of anxiety, the racing of the heart. Instead of judging ourselves for feeling this way, we simply acknowledge it. This is anger. This is frustrating. Just naming it can create enough space to keep from being overwhelmed by it. The Buddha compared the mind to a pond. If the water is disturbed and muddy, it reflects nothing clearly. If you can let the mud settle, the water becomes still and everything becomes visible. Our reactions are like that mud, stirring up chaos. Our responses, on the other hand, come from a mind that has learned to become still, even when there's noise all around. What's really amazing is that every time you practice this, even if you only manage to pause for a moment before reacting, you're strengthening new pathways in your brain. Neuroscience actually backs up what Buddhist monks have been saying for centuries. The more you practice pausing and choosing your response, the easier and more natural it becomes. Eventually, instead of being ruled by your triggers, you start to notice them with a sense of curiosity. Is this really worth my peace? Is this response true to my values? It's like moving from being an actor in a chaotic play to becoming the director, choosing the tone, the words, and the pace of your own life. Let's not pretend this is easy, especially in a world that seems to reward quick reactions and strong opinions. We live in a culture where people are expected to have instant responses, to be witty, sharp, and unflinching. But Buddhism offers a kind of gentle rebellion, to slow down, to breathe, to remember that real strength is not in being the loudest, but in being the calmest. When you learn to respond with awareness, you protect not just your own peace, but also the peace of those around you. Instead of adding more fire to a heated situation, you can become the cool breeze that soothes, the calm presence that everyone quietly admires, but can't quite explain. There's something quietly powerful about realizing that your mind is not a courtroom and your thoughts are not the judge and jury. Yet so many of us go through our days trapped inside our heads, believing every story, prediction, or criticism that arises in our own minds. Maybe you know the feeling a thought comes up. Perhaps it's fear about the future or regret about the past, and suddenly your whole body reacts as if it's absolute truth. You might find your heart racing, your stomach in knots, or your mood crashing, all because a single idea has taken hold. It's easy to fall into this trap because we're never really taught how to separate ourselves from the noise in our heads. It's like living next to a busy highway and thinking every car that passes by belongs to you. The Buddha was deeply aware of this human habit. He taught that while thoughts are natural and unavoidable, just like the wind blowing through the trees, they are not who you are. In fact, one of the central practices of Buddhism is learning to watch the mind, to notice each thought as it rises and falls, without clinging to it or letting it define your reality. If you've ever practiced mindfulness or meditation, you'll recognize this gentle guidance. Notice the thought, name it if you like, and then let it pass. You are the witness, not the traffic controller. This is such an important shift. Most of our suffering doesn't come from what's happening in the world, but from the relentless commentary in our minds. Maybe you hear a thought like, "You'll never be good enough," or "Everything is going to go wrong," and before you know it, you're acting as if those words are carved in stone. But what if you could pause, just for a moment, and say to yourself, "That's just a thought, not a prophecy"? What if you could notice it, label it as worry or doubt or memory, and then watch it float away, just like a leaf carried by the stream? The sky is not changed by the clouds that drift across it, and your true self is not defined by the temporary thoughts passing through your mind. In Buddhist practice, this process is sometimes called mental noting. It's simple but profound. Instead of arguing with your thoughts, you simply notice and name them. There's anxiety, there's planning, there's judgment. You aren't trying to make them disappear, you're just refusing to become entangled in them. This little bit of distance, this tiny gap, can be the difference between a day ruined by self-doubt and a day lived with gentle awareness. When you stop believing every thought, you open the door to inner freedom. You realize that you have a choice. You don't have to take every invitation your mind offers you. Not every thought deserves your time, your belief, or your emotional energy. Think about how much lighter you could feel if you let your thoughts come and go without clinging to them or pushing them away. It's almost like learning to live above the weather, not under it. You can feel sadness or anxiety without letting it define your whole identity. You can experience frustration or anger and still remember that these are passing states, not permanent truths. The Buddha once said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world." But here's the wisdom. You can also unmake a world of suffering by refusing to be ruled by every thought that appears. There's a strange belief many of us have picked up somewhere along the way, that happiness is waiting for us just beyond the next big achievement, the next possession, or the next moment when everything finally feels complete. We're constantly encouraged to add more to our lives, more plans, more goals, more stuff, more social events, more notifications, more noise. And yet, for all that accumulating, so few people actually feel at peace. If you take a quiet moment to look inside, you'll notice that it's rarely the external chaos that makes you feel overwhelmed. It's the inner clutter, the mental lists, the emotional baggage, the pressure to always be doing, getting and being more. Buddhist wisdom has a gentle, revolutionary answer to this problem. Peace isn't found by adding, but by subtracting. Think about the lotus flower, which is such a powerful symbol in Buddhism. It rises beautifully above the muddy water, not because it tries to escape the mud, but because it allows the mud to settle, creating clarity in the water around it. Our lives are the same. When we stop stirring things up and let the unnecessary settle, we can finally see what truly matters. It's the art of letting go, of choosing less over more, not out of lack, but out of wisdom. The modern world pushes us toward complexity. We're told to multitask, to hustle, to keep up with endless information. But Buddha taught that simplicity is not just a matter of material possessions, but of mind and heart. Simplicity means choosing one thing at a time, focusing your attention where it brings peace rather than anxiety. It's about recognizing that every extra commitment, every unchecked item on your mental to-do list, every bit of digital clutter adds a little more weight to your spirit. This weight often goes unnoticed until one day you wonder why you feel so tired, so uninspired, so disconnected from yourself. What does living simply actually look like in daily life? It's not about giving up ambition or refusing to participate in the world. It's about being clear on what deserves space in your mind, your day, and your heart. When you say yes to too many things, you're actually saying no to your own peace. Buddhist monks understand this deeply. Their days are shaped not by how much they can fit in, but by how much unnecessary noise they can let go. Their physical spaces are uncluttered, but more importantly, their inner spaces are clear and calm, making it easier to hear the wisdom of the present moment. One of the most practical ways to bring this into your life is to look for the places where things feel heavy, complicated, or out of control. Ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to peace or just adding more noise? It could be a commitment that drains you, a habit of checking your phone every few minutes, or even holding on to relationships that no longer fit the person you are becoming. Letting go doesn't mean failing. It means making space for what's truly valuable. When you begin to release the non-essential, you'll notice something magical. There's more time for real connections, more energy for creativity, and more room to breathe. There's also a subtle freedom in realizing that you don't have to chase every trend, fix every problem, or please every person. Buddha's teachings remind us that clinging to what we don't need, whether it's things, ideas, or emotional patterns, only makes us suffer. The path to a strong mind is found in the quiet courage to simplify, to make deliberate choices about where your energy goes. This isn't about living in lack. It's about choosing richness of experience over abundance of things. A simple meal eaten with mindfulness, a conversation held without distractions, a walk taken without a phone. These moments may look small from the outside, but inside they open doors to profound contentment. It's strange how easily our energy slips away without us even realizing it. You might wake up feeling ready to face the day, but by noon, your mind is already tired, scattered, and pulled in 100 directions. It happens when you say yes to things you don't really want, when you get caught up in other people's dramas, or when you allow every little annoyance to steal your peace. Most of us are never really taught how to protect our energy. We're told to give, to help, to be available, sometimes at the expense of our own well-being. But if we look closely at Buddhist wisdom, there's a gentle reminder: your inner world is sacred, and you are its guardian. Just as a temple is protected from noise and chaos, your mind deserves the same respect and care. Buddhism often compares the mind to a garden or a temple, places that require both openness and boundaries. You wouldn't let weeds overrun a beautiful garden, nor would you leave the doors of a temple wide open for dust, noise, and distractions to pour in. Yet so often, we forget to set those boundaries for ourselves. Instead, we allow toxic conversations, negative news, or even our own restless thoughts to invade our peace. The Buddha taught about right effort, which is not about exhausting ourselves but about tending carefully to our inner lives. Right effort means knowing when to act, when to rest, and when to gently say no. It's the practice of nurturing what brings light and gently closing the door on what dims it. The truth is, your energy is not limitless. Think of it like a candle flame, bright and warm when shielded from harsh winds, but easily blown out if left exposed to every gust. Some people and situations are like the wind. They drain you, leaving you feeling spent and empty. Sometimes it's as simple as spending too much time around negativity, or as subtle as scrolling endlessly through social media and feeling your mood sink without understanding why. Buddhist practice encourages us to notice these leaks, to become mindful of where our energy is going, and to choose consciously what we allow into our inner space. Ask yourself, is this feeding my peace or is it taking from it? This question, asked often, can be life-changing. Setting boundaries doesn't mean building walls or isolating yourself. It's about creating healthy spaces where you can recharge and show up as your best self. The Buddha spoke often of Sangha, or community. emphasizing the value of supportive, nurturing relationships. In your own life, notice who uplifts you, who listens without judgment, and who brings out your best. Spend more time with these people and less with those who only bring drama or drain your spirit. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and others is to step back from relationships or habits that pull you away from your center. Remember, you can be kind and compassionate without sacrificing your own well-being. A big part of protecting your energy is learning to say no without guilt. Many of us, especially those who want to help or please others, struggle with this. But every time you say yes to something that isn't aligned with your peace, you're saying no to yourself. Buddhism teaches us the importance of mindfulness in every action, even in how we use our time and attention. It's okay to say, "I can't take this on right now," or "I need some quiet time for myself." Your peace of mind is not selfish. It's the foundation from which all your other acts of kindness and service can grow. There's a quiet tension that builds inside all of us when life doesn't go the way we imagined. Maybe you put your heart into something and it didn't work out. Maybe someone you loved changed, or a door you counted on closed right in front of you. Instinctively you fight back, digging in your heels, resisting the change, trying to force things to return to the way they were. But if you pause for just a moment and really look at what's happening inside, you'll notice something important. The more you struggle against the current, the more tired and frustrated you feel. It's like swimming upstream with all your strength, only to find you're getting nowhere, except more exhausted. It's natural to want stability and to cling to what feels familiar, but sometimes what's holding us back isn't life's unpredictability. It's our own resistance to it. Buddha once compared life to a flowing river, never the same from one moment to the next. He taught that everything changes, and clinging to permanence is the root of suffering. This wisdom is especially powerful when things go wrong, because our first reaction is almost always to push against what we don't like. We convince ourselves that if we just try harder, worry more, or refuse to accept what's happening, we can change reality by force of will. But reality has its own rhythm, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply let go and allow yourself to flow with it. This isn't a weakness. In fact, it takes immense inner strength to surrender control, to say, "I don't have all the answers, but I trust that I'll find my way." When you stop fighting what you can't control, something incredible happens. You create space for new possibilities, unexpected growth, and a deeper sense of calm. In Buddhism, surrender isn't about defeat or resignation. It's about wisdom and grace. It's the recognition that some things are simply beyond our reach, no matter how much we wish it were otherwise. Think about the times you tried to force an outcome. Maybe you obsessed over a conversation you wish you could redo, or you clung to a relationship that no longer fit, or you tried to control every little detail at work, only to feel more anxious with each passing day. The suffering wasn't just in what happened, but in the desperate attempt to make things fit your expectations. Buddha reminds us that peace is found not in perfect circumstances, but in perfect acceptance. When we accept life as it is, we don't lose our power, we reclaim it. We redirect our energy from fighting reality to living more fully within it. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring or give up on your dreams. It means you release the need to control every detail and instead meet each moment with openness. Sometimes the universe has a different plan than the one you've written for yourself. When you surrender, you begin to trust that even the unexpected detours have something to teach you. Buddhism teaches us to be like water, to adapt, to move, to find our way around obstacles with gentleness instead of force. There is a soft strength in this approach, a resilience that doesn't shatter when life changes direction, but bends, adjusts, and flows. This is what allows people to endure heartbreak, disappointment, and loss, and still find meaning and even beauty on the other side. Surrender also invites you to step out of the exhausting cycle of overthinking. Have you ever noticed how much of your anxiety comes from imagining every possible scenario, preparing for every disaster, and trying to control every outcome in your mind? It's mentally and emotionally draining, and it rarely gives you the security you crave. When you practice surrender, you let go of the illusion that you can foresee or fix everything. Instead, you bring your attention back to the present moment, where real life is happening. Buddha taught that the present is the only reality, and when we live in acceptance of what's here, right now, we discover a surprising peace that isn't dependent on external events. There's a quiet exhaustion that comes from always needing to prove yourself, always needing to be the one who's right, the one who has the last word, the one who wins the argument, even if it means you go to bed with your mind buzzing and your heart pounding. Most people don't realize just how much energy is burned in this invisible struggle. The world teaches us that value comes from being seen, being heard, and being correct. But is that really true peace or just another form of battle? Buddhist wisdom offers a very different path, one that values inner stillness over outward victory. If you listen closely, you'll notice that the need to always be right is just another kind of attachment, a sneaky one that wears the mask of pride, and it can rob you of your most valuable treasure, your inner calm. Think about the last time you got into a heated debate, whether it was online, at work, or even with someone you love. There's a rush, a feeling that you must defend your viewpoint at all costs. But afterwards, does it ever feel as satisfying as you imagined? Most likely, you're left replaying what was said, wishing you'd used a different argument or wondering if you crossed a line. And if you win, you might notice the other person feels smaller or more distant. So, what exactly was gained? The Buddha taught that better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. This is not just poetic, it's a call to step away from the battlefield of egos and step into the sanctuary of real connection and understanding. The reason this is so difficult is that the urge to be right is deeply rooted in our sense of self. Our beliefs are often tied to our identity, so when someone disagrees, it can feel like a threat to who we are. Buddhism invites us to see this differently. You are not your opinions, and your worth is not determined by your ability to out-argue others. When you drop the shield and let go of the need to win, you make space for compassion. You start to listen, not just to the words, but to the person behind them. This doesn't mean abandoning your principles or letting others walk all over you. It simply means that you value peace over pride and understanding over victory. In Buddhist practice, this is sometimes called right speech, which isn't about being correct, but about speaking with kindness, clarity, and purpose. There's a mindfulness that arises when you ask yourself before speaking, is what I'm about to say true, helpful, and likely to bring more peace? If the answer is no, perhaps silence or a gentle word is the best response. Sometimes silence can be the most powerful teacher. It gives you the space to see what's truly important, and it lets others feel safe in your presence. When you're not fighting to be right, you can actually be present. You can listen, empathize, and even learn something new. Letting go of the need to be right doesn't mean giving up your voice. It means being wise about when and how you use it. It means recognizing when a discussion is spiraling into conflict and having the strength to step back, to breathe, to offer calm instead of more chaos. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." In the same way, holding on to the need to be right keeps you trapped in a cycle of inner unrest. It keeps you reactive, not receptive. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose peace even when your ego begs for a fight. True strength isn't measured by how loudly you argue, but by how calmly you walk away. Let your mind be a quiet sanctuary, where storms pass, but your stillness remains. If today's message touched your heart, I invite you to keep exploring. Watch one of the suggested videos on your screen for more wisdom and support. Thank you for being a part of Buddhist Journey. Your presence here means more than you know.